It began with a single invasion, but within days, the entire world was on fire. Planes darkened the skies, cities vanished overnight, and millions were pulled into a war they could not escape. This was World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history. But here's the truth most people don't realize. This war didn't start in 1939. It started years earlier, in the shadows of a broken peace after World War I, a treaty meant to prevent another war. Instead, it made one inevitable. So how did the world go from hope to total destruction? And could this war have been stopped before it even began? To understand that, we have to go back to where it all truly started. So, where does it really begin? It's easy to point to 1939, but the roots of World War II run much deeper. Think about the aftermath of World War I. Check the link in the description below to uncover the key factors that led to the outbreak of World War I. New here? Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest videos. Let's begin. World War I, the Great War, has just ended. Everyone's exhausted and they want peace. But the peace they created, it was shaky. The Treaty of Versailles, meant to punish Germany, ended up leaving them humiliated and resentful. The Treaty of Versailles, which was the primary peace agreement that formally ended World War I, meant to ensure peace, instead left many nations, particularly Germany, feeling humiliated and resentful. Crippling reparations, massive territorial losses. It was a powder keg waiting for a spark. And in Germany, a charismatic politician named Adolf Hitler was starting to tap into that anger. Now, Hitler wasn't the only times problem, but his extremist ideology, blaming Jews and promising to restore Germany's glory, was gaining traction because of this post-World War I instability. We'll get to his specific actions soon, but first, we need to understand the broader international landscape. Before we continue, make sure to like, comment, and share. So, while Germany is in state of political unrest, other powers were also flexing their muscles. In Italy, Benito Mussolini was already in power, dreaming of a new Roman Empire. From the mid-1930s, these aggressive powers started testing the waters. Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931 and China in 1937. Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935. Germany, defying Versailles, began rearming and remilitarizing the Rhineland in 1936. The international response? Largely appeasement. Britain and France hoped that by giving Hitler some concessions, like in the Munich Agreement of 1938, they could avoid another catastrophic war. Boy, were they wrong. These weren't just isolated incidents, they were signals. Signals that international law and diplomacy were being challenged by leaders who believed in military might and territorial conquest. The League of Nations, the international body created after World War I to prevent wars, was proving to be largely ineffective. It lacked real power. They condemned Japan's actions, but what happened? Not much. They condemned Italy's invasion of Ethiopia, but again, sanctions were weak and Italy got away with it. This showed potential aggressors that they could push the boundaries without serious consequences. And that brings us to Hitler's Germany, which was really starting to push. Hitler wasn't shy about his ambitions. First, he remilitarized the Rhineland in 1936, directly violating the Versailles Treaty. The world watched. Nothing happened. Then came the Anschluss. In 1938, Germany annexed Austria. Again, protests, but no military action from the major powers. It was becoming clear that Hitler could take calculated risks and, so far, get away with it. The next big target, the Sudetenland, a part of Czechoslovakia with a large German-speaking population. This is where things get really tense. Britain and France, desperate to avoid another war, met with Hitler and Mussolini at the Munich Conference in September 1938, and in a move that still sparks debate today. They agreed to let Hitler have the Sudetenland. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain famously returned, declaring peace for our time. But was it really peace or just a delay? Because Hitler promised that was his last time's territorial demand. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. So, Munich happened, Hitler got what he wanted, and the world breathed a sigh of relief for about 6 months. Because in March 1939, Hitler broke his promise and invaded the rest times of Czechoslovakia. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland. This time, Britain and France declared war. But Germany wasn't playing by old rules. They unleashed blitzkrieg, lightning war, fast, coordinated attacks using tanks, motorized infantry, and air power. It was devastatingly effective. Within weeks, Poland was carved up between Germany and the Soviet Union thanks to the secret Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Then came the spring of 1940. Denmark and Norway fell. The Low Countries were overrun. And in a stunning move, Germany bypassed the supposedly impenetrable Maginot Line and invaded France through the Ardennes forest. Paris fell in June 1940. Britain stood alone, facing the might of Nazi Germany. How did they survive? Dunkirk was a miracle, a desperate evacuation, saving hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers. But the real test was yet to come, the Battle of Britain, summer and fall of 1940. Hitler's Luftwaffe tried to gain air superiority over the English Channel, essential for an invasion. But Britain's Royal Air Force, aided by radar and incredible bravery, fought back ferociously. It was the first major defeat for Hitler, forcing him to postpone and eventually abandon his invasion plans. But the bombing didn't stop. The Blitz terrorized British cities for months. What kept the British people going during those dark days? Sheer grit and determination, fueled by leaders like Winston Churchill. Now, let's move to the east. Remember that Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which was a non-aggression treaty between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. It was always a marriage of convenience. On June 22, 1941, Hitler broke it spectacularly, launching Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. This opened up the Eastern Front, which would become the largest and bloodiest theater of the entire war. The initial German advance was staggering, capturing millions of Soviet soldiers and vast territories. But the sheer size of the USSR, the brutal winter, and fierce Soviet resistance began to bog down the Wehrmacht. This was the beginning of the end for Hitler's ambitions in the East. Back in the US, isolationist sentiment was strong. Many Americans felt the European war wasn't their problem. But Japan's ambitions in Asia and the Pacific were growing, clashing with US interests and allies like China. Then came December 7, 1941, the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. It was a devastating blow to the US Pacific Fleet and a moment that instantly changed everything. Here's the thing. Japan thought they could cripple the US and secure their dominance in Asia. They vastly underestimated the American response. The very next day, the US declared war on Japan. Germany and Italy, honoring their pact with Japan, declared war on the US just days later. Suddenly, the conflict was truly global. The sleeping giant had awoken. The industrial might of the United States was now fully committed. With the US now in the fight, the Allies began to push back. In North Africa, British and American forces fought grueling desert campaigns against German and Italian troops led by the legendary General Rommel. The Battle of El Alamein in late 1942 was a crucial turning point, pushing Axis forces back. This success paved the way for Operation Touch, the Allied landings in Northwest Africa in November 1942, trapping Axis forces between two fronts. Victory in North Africa by May 1943 was a vital step. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, the war reached a brutal climax at Stalingrad. From August 1942 to February 1943, one of the bloodiest battles in history raged. The Soviets, despite horrific losses, encircled and destroyed the German Sixth Army. This was a catastrophic defeat for Hitler and the beginning of the Red Army's relentless push westward. What was driving these turning points? Simply put, resources and manpower. The combined industrial might of the US, Britain, and the Soviet Union was starting to overwhelm the Axis powers. What do you think was the single most important factor in turning the tide of the war? Drop your opinion in the comments below. With North Africa secured, the Allies turned their attention to Italy, invading Sicily in July 1943. They then pushed onto the Italian mainland. It was a tough attritional campaign, fighting through mountains and determined German resistance. Mussolini was overthrown, but the fighting dragged on. But the main event was coming. The invasion of Normandy, France, D-Day, June 6, 1944. Codenamed Operation Overlord, it was the largest amphibious invasion in history. Thousands of ships, planes, and over 150,000 soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy. The fighting on the beaches was horrific, especially at Omaha Beach, but the Allies secured a foothold in France. This opened the crucial Western Front against Germany. Here's the thing, D-Day wasn't just about landing troops, it was about stretching the German army thin, forcing them to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. Following D-Day, Allied forces broke out of Normandy and began the rapid liberation of France. Paris was liberated in August 1944. The Allies were advancing on Germany from the west, while the Soviets were pushing relentlessly from the east. Germany wasn't done yet. In December 1944, they launched a surprise counter-offensive through the Ardennes forest, the Battle of the Bulge. It was their last major gamble, causing significant Allied casualties and a temporary setback. But ultimately, it failed, exhausting Germany's remaining reserves. Meanwhile, the Red Army continued its unstoppable advance. They liberated Eastern Europe and pushed into Germany itself, culminating in the brutal Battle of Berlin in April-May 1945. And woven through all this, the horrific reality of the Holocaust. While the war raged, the systematic state-sponsored persecution and murder of 6 million Jews and millions of others by the Nazi regime continued. The liberation of concentration camps like Auschwitz and Dachau in 1945 revealed the full, chilling extent of this atrocity. It's a stark reminder of the depths of inhumanity and the importance of remembering. As the Soviets closed in on Berlin, Hitler committed suicide on April 30, 1945. Mussolini had been captured and executed days earlier. Germany's unconditional surrender followed on May 8, 1945, VE Day, Victory in Europe. But the war wasn't over. In the Pacific, Japan still fought on fiercely. The US employed an island-hopping strategy, capturing key islands closer and closer to Japan. Battles like Iwo Jima and Okinawa were incredibly costly, with Japanese soldiers and civilians fighting to the death. Facing the prospect of a bloody invasion of the Japanese mainland, President Truman made a fateful decision. On August 6, 1945, the US dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 3 days later, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. The devastation was unprecedented. Faced with this new, terrifying weapon and the Soviet Union declaring war on Japan, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender on August 15, 1945. The Second World War was final over. This day is known as VJ Day, Victory over Japan. The war left an estimated 70 to 85 million dead, countless wounded, and vast swathes of the world in ruins. But from the ashes rose new institutions, like the United Nations, aimed at preventing future global conflicts. The world map was redrawn, and former allies the US and Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, setting the stage for the Cold War. World War II may be over, but its consequences are still shaping the world we live in right now. And what came next was even more dangerous. A silent war, where one mistake could end humanity forever. If you think World War II was intense, wait until you see what happened next. Watch my next video on the Cold War.